Just the wheels are coming off.
I know. It's coming up.
Oh, there's a bunch of new ones.
And I like the new wax area. It's not I don't like Marshall.
You don't like the acronym?
Not so much because the police. So I don't know if we can give this question. So I'm working on it that has a filter.
Oh, okay.
So when I see art as an acronym, my first reaction is so this comment very
yeah. No, are we supposed to? We're 15:20. Okay, we're going to start in just a couple minutes. We're looking for a second note taker. Would somebody like to help the working group by volunteering to take notes? It's a good way to keep your focus on what's being discussed. Wait till some more familiar faces come in. Excellent choice. There's an easy way to fix that. All right. Is Naeem here? Ah, awesome. Is Stein here? Great. And Mary and Brian are here. Yes, I know your faces well. Okay, so we still need a second note taker. Really important, really helpful. It's going to get really awkward if we have to wait. Really. It's not hard. Thank you, Kyle. You just volunteered. Did you realize that? That's what you were raising your hand for? Yep, but thank you. I'm so grateful. We need a Jabber scribe. Would somebody volunteer to be a Jabber scribe? That's like the easiest job in the world. All you have to do is watch Jabber. Somebody? Jabber scribe? Come on. Step up. All right. Thank you, Brian. Now we can start. And the clipboards are going around? A backup. We need a backup Jabber scribe. Now you might be up there at the same time. I've seen it before. Will somebody please, Kevin Fall, be a backup Jabber scribe? Anybody, Kevin Fall? Be a backup Jabber scribe? Oh, excellent. Thank you. Oh, clever. You're good. Yeah, I put in a ticket to get new pens for the clipboards. Why don't you let them sit? Someone will probably be by momentarily with pens because I think they have already acknowledged the ticket. Okay, what did it say? Clipboards. It's assigned to Alexa. All right, well, it's quieted down a little bit, so let's get started. My name is Aaron Falk. I'm the chair. This is the Transport Services Working Group in the transport area. This is the note well. You should note it well. You've probably seen it before. The short version is that anything that you say in the hallways or in a meeting is considered a contribution to the IETF and shared with the community. Today's agenda. We're having the agenda bash right now. I've got one slide on working group status. After that, we're going to talk about three things. First thing is a review on where we are on what we've been calling Doc 1, draft IETF TAPS transports. We think that it may be ready for last call with a few bits of additional text that are planned that we'll hear about. And we're looking for feedback from the group as to what other folks think. In particular, are there any protocols that are missing that should be added to it? When we get to working group last call, we really need some detailed review, both for the technical and the editorial content. So that's something you can think about now. It'll certainly help the work of the group. The second thing we're going to talk about is a document that's been discussed a little bit on the working group list, draft Welzel TAPS transports. One of the co-authors, Naeem, is going to be here to talk about that. It's a somewhat algorithmic processing of transport protocols in a way that's intended to help development of an API. Are those pens? Did our pens just arrive? Yes, we need pens. Our clipboards have no working pens. We can't sign the blue sheets if we don't have pens. I thought the ticket was clear, but all right, help is on the way. So Naeem's going to talk about the process that they use to generate this draft and like to see some discussion about whether folks think it's a useful document for the working group to take up. Our charter has what we've been calling document 2, which is it has two features. One is it selects a subset of the protocols that we identify in the first document. So we take, of the transport protocols that we describe in the first document, we take a subset of those that are going to be recommended for use, for implementation in the final step of the working group, the final piece of the charter, and then also make some recommendations on which pieces should be used of those protocols. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. Stein's going to talk about an approach that they have used in a draft that's been circulated on the list. And that's can be, I think, a shorter discussion. So we've got 90 minutes. I think we've got plenty of time to cover these things. And then any other business. So is there anything that anybody wants to bash on the agenda? All right, well, let's move along then. So a little bit of working group status. I apologize for my cough. This is the schedule that I presented in Prague. And I think that even though that we didn't have the interim meeting that we discussed at the last time we were together, I think that we are still pretty much on track for this schedule. And I'm probably going to send it to Spencer to have it put up on the site. If we do talk about if we do adopt this other document that Naeem's going to talk about, we may end up slipping out the later documents. But I think that's something that we can discuss a little bit later today. So the most salient piece of the schedule is that we want to finish the working group last call of the first document soon, ideally by the end of the year, which means getting people will have to focus over the next several weeks to get that out. And that's it for what I have to say. So at this point, let me turn it over to Brian. Want the clicker?
I would like the clicker, please.
Don't forget the pink box. Very important.
I am still technically in the pink box. Remember, you have to unpause it down at the bottom, or you have to pause it because otherwise it'll just go. It'll be one of those. What are those called? The automatically running slideshows.
Hairstyle?
Anyway. Yeah. Okay. We're good. But oh, this doesn't work because it's off.
Not working?
It's off. Now it's on. Might be battery with. All right.
Go manual method.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So we're here talking about draft IETF TAPS transports. This is basically just reminding those of us who haven't looked at this document since the last time we talked about it in Prague, why we're writing it and what the document thinks it is. Actually, the charter has obviously remained unchanged since the last time we talked about the document. The abstract has as well. So there's a couple of things in the abstract. I actually went back and had a look at this because we've had this discussion about the other TAPS transports document and how that fits in. And yeah, so it describes services provided by existing IETF protocols. We do talk about congestion control mechanisms in the abstract, but we don't really in the document, so we should probably fix that. It's designed to help application network stack programmers and to inform the work of the IETF TAPS working group. So this was always kind of intentioned as a dual purpose document, right? So this is the thing that goes to step 2, but we hope that it's sort of a useful summary at the same time. So when we're looking at taking the document as we've updated the 07 Rev to get it out in December, which is of 2015. Wow, that's pretty close. Basically, we can ask a question about this document. Next slide, please. Are we there yet? And the answer is yes. Asterisk. We're basically done. Aaron, actually, I'm going to quote you. Ran into Aaron earlier in this meeting. I don't remember what day it was. He said, yeah, I read this document front to back for the first time, and it's actually pretty good. And I had the same, for 07. I looked at it, in the editorial, we've been down in the weeds for a really long time about, okay, well, we need to make a decision about where this, how we need to go get another transport protocol. We need to edit it so that it actually fits into the sort of the flow of the rest of the document. I hadn't really read it front to back, and it's basically kind of done. And what isn't done, next slide, is almost certainly doable for December, even considering the fact that I'm not really going to be home before December, and Gory isn't here, and Miri is actually not going to be home till January. So I guess we have to. It's me and Gory figuring this out. But even given that, I still think it's doable because this is all we have to do. It's basically already content complete. I did I had my editor tell me, text editor tell me that there are 10 editor's notes still in the document. I had a quick look at these. These are mostly editorial, and it's probably safe to simply drop many of them at this point. Say, okay, yeah, we're not going to do it. This was a good idea, but we don't have the cycles. We're done. It's not going to add much more to the document if we resolve this. There is one editor's note that is the only content in a section. That's the section 392, which is the interface on RTP. This was written by Gory. So, I mean, the section was written by Gory. He didn't provide an RTP interface section. So we either need a couple of sentences there to conform with the format, or we can break compliance with the format. I will discuss with Gory what we want to do on that.
We had an author.
We did. Varun, who is Varun here?
I think he's attending that.
He is. I've seen him in the hallways. But yeah, we were.
Smart enough not to.
He's yeah. we were unable to get text from him.
He was in the human rights group 5 minutes back.
Okay.
So wait, Colin.
So I think
you're at
like
the microphone,
storming in,
Colin. Can we talk about the specific issue just for a moment? We have text, which could probably use some. If we just keep that, it could use some review to see if it is unacceptable, misleading, or otherwise inadequate.
we have text for the interface?
Don't we?
For this subsection? No, we don't have any text
Oh,
for the
no, we
subsection.
have the introductory
We have
text.
text,
but not the-
yeah, we have the, so we could actually see if there's anything that we can pull out of the introductory text that talks about the interface in such a way that we could stick it in here, right? I mean, the problem is that with respect to RTP interface, the question is which one, right? I mean, there's.
What do you mean by interface?
So what the interface down to RTP looks like to its clients in the over RTP application layer, which is a little bit of a weird question for it.
Tends to be very tightly integrated with the application.
Okay, so it kind of sounds like that's the sentence that needs to go into this. So I can probably write that, or you can write it and get a contributor credit
there
for it.
is a draft in RMCAT that talks about this.
Yes.
You can probably just reference that draft to give an example,
Okay, like so even just sort of like introductory text from that draft
for example.
could be, okay, cool. Colin, can you like send a sentence to the list from the introductory text from that draft and we can call this done? You're
I observed that your draft has twice the text for lightweight UDP. Is that by design?
Yeah, I saw that too.
Oh, okay. Let's put
UDP
that on
likes
the
in there
list.
twice.
Let's put that on the list of editorial things to look at.
Is that a test to check that you could read it or something?
It's a very
Thank you, Christian. Thank you.
it's a very subtle joke about best effort protocols. No, it isn't. That's oversight.
Okay.
Yeah, we will fix that as well. The other suggestion that we're making is we have like basically two ways of looking at all of the transport services or features that we have pulled out of this analysis. There's one was this great big matrix that we wanted to make, which Gory has sort of a straw man from even sort of a much earlier version of the document. Mary and I looked at filling that out, and what we came up with was the tree structure that is in section 4, the body of section 4, because it's really, really difficult to make a matrix that is at all interesting or useful that fits into 72 columns. When you have more than on the order of 50 features and on the order of 12 things that you're going to matrix together. It just doesn't make any readable sense. So if other people feel strongly about that, please step up now. But otherwise, I think we're just going to cut it. We're going to go with the tree structure. One thing missing from that tree structure is then the links back into the protocols which support them, but we will do that as part of the editorial pass on 08. We also would like working group review of this, because this is just something we sort of put together as okay, well, we're structuring this. One, check for completeness and correctness. Two, check for structure. If there's anything that's structured there in a way that's not useful, let us know. Once those are done, so actually, how would you like to do this as the chair? Do you want to put working group last call on 07 and these become working group last call comments to ourselves? Or do you want to do working group last call after we send this version of the document in, which is going to be like mid to late November?
So I found a dozen or so typos, spelling errors,
Yep.
little things. I think that if you don't do a cleanup before you do that, you're going to chew up a lot of people's cycles, all reporting the same little things.
So we'll do working group last call on 08.
Yeah, give it a thorough spell check. Take out the duplicate UDP light section.
Yeah.
But first, I think that what we want to do is ask whether there's, to the room, whether there's anybody who has an opinion as to whether they think this, I mean, the authors think this document is ready for a working group last call.
Yeah, so the big question is on the previous slide, not the little bits, but the big bit, the big are we done? And we think we are. And if we're not, we'd like to hear that.
Can we see a show of hands of who's actually read the document? All right, pretty good. So of the people who've read the document, who thinks it's ready for a working group last call? Okay, 1, 2.
Huh?
I think it's ready with the comments given.
Okay.
Can you reset your question? Because you first requested Brian to do a new version that finalized the edits.
Yeah.
So are you asking whether you want the last call after the edit or before the edit?
I'm sorry. So it's so hard to do these questions clearly. What I'm trying to say is, if Brian does the cleanup that's listed on this slide, so we think that this is the remainder of the work that needs to be done on the document, modulo a spell check and the issue that you just pointed out. Oh, and the comments from Karen. Yes, that's right. Does anybody see a blocking issue that needs to be fixed before we take this to working group last call? Okay, so I think we're ready to do this.
Okay, so we send an 08.
Send an 08 and we'll start a working group last call. We'll try to, depends on where it falls in the calendar, but it would be awfully nice if we could get it done before the holidays. But,
we'll try.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Any other comments on this draft? Well done, Sally
Thank you very
Forth.
That was much less controversial than the last one of these.
Yeah, wait to Buenos Aires.
Okay. So can we go back to the first slide?
Yeah, I'm finally here. You can use the clicker. Let me. Okay. The little play button down here advances the slides. I don't know why, but it works.
Only one slide?
I don't know. Let's find out.
Doesn't work.
It worked for me. Oh, that's because I had it on the. So it doesn't work. I'll advance. Just tell me.
So I'm named Hademi from University of Oslo. So this draft is basically a work of Michael Wells and Michael Tuxton, and I happen to be the co-author of this draft. It's basically about a different approach on how to identify the services in the transport protocols and congestion control mechanisms. So next slide, please. So what is the scope of this internet draft? Is basically addressing the working group's charter item 1, which is to define a set of transport services provided by the existing IETF protocols, and also this works as a starting point. It only considers the services that are being considered between 2 endpoints only. So this draft is intended to be a complement or supplement to the basically the TAPS transport internet draft. And currently it's in current shape with the 0.0 version. It only includes TCP and SCTP. In the future, we are envisioning that we will have more protocols included in the draft. Next slide, please. So what is the goal of this internet draft is basically to use a generic approach and to basically develop a document that is used by mainly the TAPS system designers and API developers to be able to map the services between these protocols and also to know how to use them and in each of the protocols that are included in the draft. It basically tries to answer the questions that arises when you're trying to basically build and implement a TAPS system. Next slide, please. So it basically follows a three-pass approach. So it goes through pass 1, which looks at different RFCs that are related to each of the protocols that are included there. And it summarizes the relevant parts, and it basically says what is provided by that protocol to the upper layer, as well as the applications, and how it's being used. This is the pass 1. The pass 2, it tries to categorize the services derived from pass 1 and categorize them based on the metric, whether they relate to a connection, a maintenance or establishment of a connection or availability of it, or it's related to a dense data transmission phase. And eventually in the pass 3, what's going to happen is that we're going to present the superset of all the services that we figured out for all the protocols based on the list in the pass 2, as well as the text in the pass 1, which is according to the RFCs, to include the services that are basically static in certain protocols. And next slide, please. So the approach, I'm going to explain the approach in pass 1. So in the current draft, we are looking at TCP and SCTP. And we define service here as any form of interaction between the transport protocol and its user. It could be a ULP or an application. So we go through the RFCs, and then as you can see in the table, we identify certain interactions, and then we exclude those services that are that should not be implemented in those protocols according to other RFCs. And for example, the urgent mechanism according to the RFC 6093, or the services that are optional or implementation dependent. We exclude those from the list, and also the services that are already provided elsewhere, somewhere else by another mechanism. And then we end up having a table like that. For example, for TCP, you have open, send, receive, and so on and so forth. And for SCTP, you have associate, send, receive, and shut down, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. And then once we have this list in the table, we're going to the pass 2, which basically we try to categorize the services that we derived previously, whether they relate to a connection or data transmission. So we use a format. Basically, the format is a category dot, whether we might have a subcategory or not. We could have a subcategory and then the service name and then the protocol. For example, in case of TCP, in the connection establishment phase, we could have connection.establishment.connect TCP. And the same we could have for SCTP. And then using that kind of format, then we could map different services between different protocols and then explain how they are being used in the API or in RFC. Next slide, please. And then when we go through this pass 2, then for every service that we identify, we also define a comment that invokes that service and also the event. Optionally, the parameters that are being used as an input to use that service, also the values that are being returned optionally. And we also provide some comments about how this service is being used in the certain protocol, which could be extremely useful for the API developers and the TAP system designers. And we use the generic abstract APIs as well as the RFCs to derive those comments and more information that you can see in the tables here, for example, in case of Connect as an example of the service for TCP and SCTP. Next slide, please. So once we have the pass 2, then we move on to pass 3. Then we basically turn everything upside down. We basically look at all the supersets of all the services that we found in the protocols that are included in the draft, and based on the pass 2 as well as the pass 1. And then, for example, here, we are not presenting the entire service set, but basically a part of it, just for the sake of, a clarity. For example, in case of this connection availability, that's basically a category and a subcategory, then we could derive, for example, listen to one specified local interface as a service, and then we know that protocols like TCP and SCTP would provide that. If we have another service which is being able to listen on n specified local interfaces, then that's the CTP that provides that, and TCP doesn't provide that. So in case of the data received, which is also category subcategory, then we know that the SCTP can provide us with the choice of a stream to receive on, whereas the TCP doesn't support multi-streaming. So yes, please.
I don't know if it's important, but no, actually, SCTP cannot do that. But SCTP can tell you which streams it receives it on. But that's just a comment.
So the next slide, please. Okay.
Something that we want to implement for SCTP, but it isn't there yet.
Okay. Any more questions? Somebody's moved. Okay.
Kevin Fall, CMU. It might relate to that comment. I'm not certain. So what about things that are intermediary, not as specified by the protocol, but of the buffering state, for example? So if I have amount of unact data, I have amount of stuff that, there's been extensions through get sock opt and so forth that are useful in some cases to get that, but they're really not about the protocol. They're about the buffer management on top of the protocol. Is that go in here somewhere?
So in this draft, we are not looking at things that is beyond the RFCs and the API description of those RFCs. So
when you say the API description of those RFCs, you mean whose API description of those RFCs?
Well, that's also the discussion that we need to have. So, but I mean, in this case, we have been looking at certain APIs, so that are basically RFC'd. So.
Okay, so only things that show up in
only
RFCs.
IETF stuff, basically.
I see.
But I mean, I feel very strongly about this. I mean, you have the document I've read only refers to 4960. And the agreement and the way we've worked in the SCTP community is to have the API specified in RFC 6458. And I think it is not valid to have a document here that does not refer to 6458. So I don't know when we're going to discuss that, but if it was now, I mean, this is, for me, a blocking comment.
So this is more about the details in the document, not the approach, right? So
yes, but I would say that in the document right now, you state that you're only using 4960, and that was not what you said here orally. You said that you would use RFCs, and then I'm happy. I'm just saying that right now it's stated in the document that the basis is 4960, and I'm saying that that is not. I don't believe that's valid for SCTP at least. So I'm happy if you say that you would include the RFCs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would like to have your input. Yep. So the discussion that we're going to have before we go through this discussion, I would like to state one thing is that using this approach that we are taking, so we're basically able to derive services from any text that basically talks about what the protocol provides and how it's being used. And now I would like to have this discussion on what protocols to include in this draft. So what you see is basically, it's very simple. It's only TCP versus SCTP. So it's get kind of more interesting when we have more protocols there, that we could actually see a difference between the set of services. And some of the services won't show up, haven't shown up here yet, because we just don't have the protocols which would provide those services. So if you have more protocols, then we would have a longer list of services that would basically be quite similar to the TAPS transport draft, but also we have other informations here about how to use those. So yeah. So
I have a small problem there about composition. Is that part of the rationale for doing this analysis is to do composition of ad hoc protocols that fit exactly some applications need. And when I see what we do in terms of composition, it's very seldom in terms of services, as in there are very few applications that do not want to receive data, for example. But it's mostly in terms of what kind of implementation do you want underneath. Like, do you want to be robust to, say, mobility, or do you want to pay the cost of forward error correction, or things like that, which are the way the thing is implemented more than what it actually does. So I'm a bit concerned when we start from just the API there. Because right now we choose the implementation by choosing the protocol.
Well, basically, the current text approach is to use both protocol and API. So it's not something that is fully API dependent. So it also looks at if you've read the document, it also looks at the text in the protocol. And you don't necessarily need an API description. We could use a generic API or abstract API to be able to derive the services.
But suppose that, for example, I say I don't want to pay the cost of selective acknowledgement because it doubles my buffer requirement. Okay, that's a perfectly valid implementation choice. I mean, that is not apparent anywhere in the API today, or even in the service, the same service.
But does that fit into the item 1 of the charter, which is trying to basically derive the services that are provided by the already existing protocols? And I'm not quite sure about that.
I think if it doesn't fit the letter of the charter, it certainly fits the spirit.
I have a slightly different view of what we're trying to accomplish. And, maybe I'm out of sync with the group because I wasn't here for the original discussion. But the problem as I understood it was that there was a desire to be able to use new protocols, starting with existing standards, based on existing standards, where they would work, and fall back to more common protocols where they wouldn't work. So use SCTP if you can get SCTP end-to-end, and if you can't, fall back to TCP. And if TCP doesn't work, you fall back to HTTP over TCP or something like that. And so it was not about composition of the elements of what an individual protocol provides, but the goal was to allow selection of to use the best protocol you can, but that would work end to end. I think that the analysis that we've done so far can support many other approaches, but that was the problem that I understood, in our original problem statement of what we're trying to accomplish. And so it seems to me that this goes towards that of being able to articulate. You want to be able to say you want an application to be able to say what it wants in a way that you can reasonably, say, oh, okay, well, this set of protocols will meet the needs of this application, but these ones won't. So I'll try, the best of these until I find one that works.
I want to add something to it, because it might be even simpler than just a fallback, for example. It might be just providing a good interface to choose the right protocol instead of giving the application designer a name, you have to choose between those protocols, and they don't even know what the protocols do. So I've talked to application designers who asked me, should I use HTTP or should I use TCP? And like, that's the interface, which is not really good, well understandable for them. So does it make sense?
It seems to me that once you've done that, you can go and say, all right, now I'm going to build underneath this. Instead of just using existing protocols, I'm going to create some new set of composable pieces that support the same API. But that, to me, is a more ambitious goal than the one that this group is trying to solve right now.
To answer Miria's example, because I think concrete examples like that is very useful. Okay, so you have an application, and the application designer is choosing between using TCP and using HTTP. They typically do not choose that because TCP provides a stream of data and HTTP provides a get post pragma. They choose that because they are concerned about getting to firewalls, or they choose that because they are concerned about hitting the load balancer in their server farm, or that they choose that because they want to do a specific trade-off between overhead and facilities. But these are not about the service themselves. It's not the nature of the service that changes. It's the implementation characteristics.
So, I mean, that's the kind of examples you gave just is the stuff we actually, that should be represented in the interface. But in this example I just brought, it was even easier. Like the application designer just used some kind of library, and that was the two choices he had, and he couldn't make any sense of it out of it.
I have seen concrete examples of doing an application and having to choose, what kind of API I use. And people do all kinds of stuff, but typically they start with having consideration of implementation, consideration of firewall traversal, consideration of overhead. More than, and then once you can pass data around, then if you don't have multiplexing, you can do it yourself and things like that. They do it.
I think we agree.
We agree.
Yeah. Okay. So that was fine.
I disagree entirely. No, actually, I agree with all of that. So I wanted to go back to something that Karen said, and that started this, what Christian said, that when you are making a choice about which interfaces you're going to look at in order to do this decomposition, recomposition exercise, which, by the way, I think is a really cool exercise. And I was really happy to see the features that fell out of this, because that gives us, for those features that show up both in the working group document, TAPS transports list, and your list, we now have a lot more confidence that those are probably features that we care about, right? So we've come to these from two completely different as I think that we can sanely do ways, and we get to the same answer for those. That's good. That's really useful. The choice to, concretely, I could say the choice to use, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong, the SCTP protocol's abstract API versus the SCTP sockets API is a completely arbitrary choice. And it would be interesting to me to see what results you would get for SCTP if, as Karen suggests, you use the sockets API as the basis and not the abstract API. I don't know that you'll get a different answer. Karen believes that you will. She knows a lot more about SCTP than I do, so yeah. The problem then is that we don't have that same document for any of the other protocols that we want to look at, that we could treat authoritatively as an authoritative RFC reference to it. And when you get into saying, okay, well, we're going to take the least common denominator, the commonly used TCP, along with all of the socket options, along with some sort of like same meta protocol over the socket options, then you get right down into the arbitrary choices weeds that you were trying to get out of. I don't have a concrete suggestion for that. I just see that it's kind of a problem with this approach.
Quick counter remark. I mean, I'm not saying that things are going to fundamentally change. So this is more that there are comparisons in the document that's just plainly wrong. So when I'm saying that, yes, this draft will change, but I'm not saying that it will fundamentally change the exercise. And I think that's important.
So what I'm interested to discuss is
to be
more,
clear,
yeah.
I mean, while the socket API for HTTP contains a lot of advanced features, I'm not thinking that all these advanced features necessarily would go in here. There's just right now some basic things that are specified in that RFC, which are not in the one that you're referring to, which are important to have included.
Yep.
And then of course the problem is that now when you compare that, which sounds like the right thing to do, to the TCP abstract API, now you've got an apples and oranges problem. And I wish I had a suggestion for which wrongly shaped orange to compare to SCTP you should pick, and I don't have one.
So this is not an API-oriented document. I mean, we use APIs, but I mean, you could actually use the normal CTP and also TCP's RFCs to actually get that. So this is not a 100% API-oriented document. So, but I mean, you could use any of those, but I mean, depends on how extensive you want to get into deriving all the services there. So far, I mean, we are almost converging to all the lists that are in the TAPS transport document. So as long as we get to this, well, it gives us the same results, but also it gives us the information how to use the transport protocols and each of these protocols, how to use them. So that's basically the valuable information and extra information that this document gives us.
So, like when you just say this, that you also use the RFC text to do this, then I really don't understand the difference that much anymore. I think like actually your approach as you presented it sounds very tempting. But then if you figure, and then if I started reading document, you actually try to actually look at protocols, and you don't really apply this approach so clearly because it doesn't get you so far. And I think that both approaches cannot guarantee that we get the complete list of features. We might always miss something, and say it can supplement it, but at the moment I still don't really see the value in putting additional effort into this approach. I mean, like we have in the TAPS transport document, we have like a very small section on interfaces for every protocol, and we didn't put too much effort into it because we didn't have the feeling that we would get much out of it, but we could also extend those sections.
Where do you derive these interfaces from?
RFCs. The same way you do it, but like we didn't put the effort in and discuss all the details because we thought it don't get too much out of it. Yeah.
I mean, the point here is that if you want to have the list of services, that's of course very cool. But then when you want to implement something, these services actually mean different things in different transport protocols. So let's say you could have the per message reliability in a CTP, and that's not possible to do that in TCP.
Yeah, but that's something that you would. That's like the second document for me.
So that's something that you would figure out once you take this approach.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't mean that the feature doesn't. The feature itself exists somewhere, so we should spell it out that it is there. And then in the second step, in the second document, we actually look at this list of features where we know that we cannot provide the whole choice because that's currently not implemented, and we get it down to those pieces that we can put right now into a TAPS implementation and implement right now. That's for me step 2.
Okay.
I don't know if this document belongs to step 1 or step 2, but I think I found that it's a useful document. It may be, I think that the TAPS 07 or 08 is a document that can live on and has value in its own. I think this document, I see it more as having value in the process of us defining the TAPS API. So I think it's good that it goes a step deeper than the other document. For us to have more concrete information, and also to perhaps to isolate a little more details than what was in the other document. But we are not. I mean, you're not at all attempting to go into all details. You're just actually just specifying a few more details and trying to do that to find out what is exactly what we want to have. So for me, that's exercise is useful, and I enjoyed reading the document, and I enjoyed seeing both TCP and SCTP, and then seeing your sort of your common view on them in the end, because that common view you don't get from this transport document. Yep. So from that perspective, I support the effort, but I see it as an effort that supports the work that we're doing more than something that would live on necessarily with value when the TAPS API has been defined. Then I have a different comment that I don't know. It's about the TCP API. It's completely. It was to the discussion we had before. I think that there's a problem presently with the TCP API that you're using an RFC for that, an RFC that's very old, and which was outdated implementations 20 years ago or something like that. So there is a problem with these implementations and these APIs, because the discussions, I mean, very concretely about the push and the urgent bit, yep. And they're not implemented as they're written in the RFCs today. And I don't know where you want to land, but I would have thought the sensible thing to do was to look at the socket API implementations that are out there in BSD and in Linux and say, well, there is some commonality here of how it's implemented, and not refer to an RFC that everybody agrees is outdated, even if it is an RFC. So in respect of which apple or orange to use when looking for TCP, yeah, I would look into the POSIX socket API and try to forget some of the details, but look at it sort of from high level and try to see the commonalities.
Yes, I think we can basically, as this document tries to evolve, then we can look at all these possibilities later on.
Yep. So, hi, Gory Fairhurst. I know I'm not even going to try to do a Gory impression. So I do think this is very useful and complements the description in TAPS transports. I don't know whether we can replace the document we have with this, but I do think we can learn a lot more with this approach as well. The other protocols for this document should definitely be kept out of scope. Now I'm no longer Gory Fairhurst.
The other protocols. So he's saying that we should stop with TCP and SCTP?
Maybe even just stop at TCP and SCTP.
Is that what he said?
Gory, is that what you're saying? Stop at TCP and SCTP?
No.
No. Say what you mean then.
Oh,
there's like a
he's
big
talking
no.
about the ones on the slide listed under other.
So
beyond these, stop with these.
There. Yes.
Stop with UDP, UDP Lite, MPTCP, DTLS, and TLS.
Yep.
Is that what you mean, Gory? It's like a seance.
Yeah.
Move the pointer. Gory?
Yes.
Okay, Gory's typing.
Propagation delay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he told me yes.
Yes, and possibly DCCP.
Yeah, oh, that's right.
Yes.
We discussed that on the list.
I think that's actually the main thing that I wanted to discuss today. Basically, we're going to proceed with including those in the bold font there, but I'm not quite sure with DCCP. And then we had discussions on the mailing list whether we need to include these or not. And this is something I like to just hear from the group on how to proceed with this. So.
Again, I want to clarify my statement. So I think the approach makes absolutely sense and could be complementary. But then when I was reading your protocol, I had the feeling that you don't even clearly follow your approach, because you look back into the RFCs and the protocol description, whatever.
We only look at the RFCs when there are certain services that are static in certain protocols. For example, in case of TCP, you always know that with TCP you get reliability.
Yeah, but that's completely independent of any interface, right? So it's like it's not very clearly followed. But anyway,
well,
so
that's pass one basically.
I'm not
so
wanting to block this effort, and I'm not objecting against this effort. So that's fine. And then on the DCTCP point, I think it's not very well used, but it has a clear intention what the use case is. There is an implementation, so I think we should integrate it.
I agree with that. Okay, so I think I almost have a consensus on what protocols to have there. I mean, I assume. So with the protocols listed there, including DCCP, and
well,
then
are you planning on doing that writing yourself with your co-authors, or do you need help?
Well, I think we can manage so far, but of course we welcome help from others as well, contributing text, and because there's like lots of protocols and this matrix, and it's gonna get bigger and bigger. So in case of DCCP, definitely we need help. So
So there's several questions that I think you haven't gotten feedback on, other than from Gori. I think there's a proposal to first. I guess the first question is, should this be a working group document? And then we can talk about if we think it's a working group document, what we think should be in it. How many people have read this document? Let's just see how informed the group is here. Okay, well, everybody at the microphone appears to have read the document. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good sign, right? Does anybody, who thinks that we should adopt this as a working group document? Yeah, let's hum. All right, let's hum. Sorry, I'm not show of hands, but hum if you think we should adopt this as a working group document. All right, a subtle hum. Who thinks we should not adopt this as a working group document? Absolute silence. Okay, so I think that's a decision. So Brian's gone up to the microphone. Oh, Gori was humming. Oh, I didn't see when Gori hummed. I think, well, his word said that he supported it, so I'm assuming he hummed one. Yes. Go ahead.
For which point on our charter?
1, as a supplement to the
Okay.
TAPS transport document.
Okay.
I would, yeah. So
that was the answer I was hoping you were going to give.
Yeah.
And we actually kind of discussed this before, but yeah, I wanted to make sure that was clear in the.
It's definitely in 1 from our perspective.
No one has suggested replacing document 1 with
Right.
this document.
Right.
And so I didn't think that's what we were humming on. And,
Right.
And so people should speak up if they disagree with that. I don't think this is document 2 either.
Right.
So it
No,
seems
I
to me
didn't
that
think
this
it was. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was agreed with that
Yeah.
before it went down as.
Yeah. So I think we discovered a little bit of work that might help us get from 1 to 2.
Yep. Okay.
Spencer, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so Spencer Dawkins, for the purposes of this conversation, the responsible area director, do you think that, and I'm probably asking Aaron, do you think that this requires any changes to the charter at all?
I think we're adding a new deliverable. I don't think we're changing the scope of the charter. I think we want to publish, I think we're going to work on this document and publish it as an RFC. Do we have to have a document listed as a milestone in order to publish it as an RFC? It's a process question.
You all might want to say those things at the microphone.
Let me repeat, Miriam. Miriam is saying that we may say that it takes us 2 documents to satisfy 1 milestone, which I think that's the consensus that we're reaching here. Is that for the
and my thing, like I say, is just to be kind of clear on which one of those things is true, because I was kind of hearing that might be a different deliverable. 2 documents to do the same deliverable, that's one thing in the charter, because those show up as milestones, which like you and I negotiate basically. But if it's changing the deliverables, what is actually being delivered, that's charter text change, so that's going to the wider community.
Right. So I believe that we have not that the goal of this document is not to change the scope of what the group is trying to accomplish. And what we've discovered is that it takes 2 drafts to do it. So to me, this is not a scope change. It's not a change in the charter. So and I'm open if people want to have a discussion of this. And so I think at that point it's mechanics, but we've lost Spencer's attention.
Okay, thank you all.
Just a quick comment. So, I mean, I think we have now 2 documents addressing the same milestone. However, this milestone was due in June 2015, and as this document takes some time, you might just change the date of the milestone.
Yeah, right.
And also our milestone is phrased, it says submit an information a document. So you can change the phrasing to submit information documents if you want to, but I don't think that's
So
necessary.
I have to, do we, Pete?
Pete Resnick. Changing the milestone does not require a charter change.
Thank you.
It's only a question of up above those milestones, there's number 1, number 2, and number 3. I believe this document satisfies number 1.
Yeah, well, it's part of number 1.
It's part of number 1.
Yeah, okay. I think,
then the answer is change the milestone so long as Spencer agrees that changing the milestone is a good idea.
okay, that's helpful. And I think that getting further into the mechanics isn't a good use of everybody's time. So, but I'll work out something with Spencer and we'll consult Pete if we need more help.
So yeah, so back to Spencer, and I like to say I was a little confused by the answers I was getting on whether this required a change to the deliverables or not. If the answer is it doesn't change the deliverables, you're just going to use 2 documents to satisfy one of the deliverables. Spencer thinks that could be the right answer. Spencer thinks that rechartering to do stuff that's not on the charter now would be a conversation I'd like to have.
Not a conversation I'd
in
like
the fullness
to
of time, but it sounds like we're not trying to have that conversation, and I'm not trying to start it.
Okay. All right, good. Well, I think we're all on the same page here. Okay, so now we're working on a new document. So there's a proposal on the slide, which I think only Gori has expressed an opinion on, which is that the existing draft is extended to include the protocols in bold and not the ones that are listed at the bottom of the slide. And does anybody have any input on that?
Hi, Brian Trammell. Looks fine to me. Again, I think you have a little bit of a problem with DCCP in terms of what you choose as the API, but you know that you have that problem. That's why I sat down earlier. Yep. I think this is a fine list. Run with it.
That's what we also think as authors. So.
Can I waste like 30 seconds of our time with mechanics and process? Are we going to confirm this on the list?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we've already discussed it, most of this on the list, but I think that we've made some decisions in the room, and we should revisit them on the list. Okay. I think. Do you have anything else to say? Because I think we're done.
We have decisions on both items, so we go on.
We have tentative decisions that need to be revisited on the list, but I think yeah, the room has given you some input. So thanks, Naeem. Okay. All right, moving right along.
Again, I forgot one little comment. So we should use the same terminology in both documents. Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, like, I think the group converged to a terminology. You should just apply it in your document. Because the group has converged to terminology. You should apply it in your document, what's defined. Okay.
If you can't do that, we need to do it soon because we're tightening the screws on the first document. So, okay. Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Stein.
Yes, I'm very glad we have come to a consensus regarding the document 1. But I'll try to shed some light on how to get further on this. So next slide. And this is our the protocol stack we are working on. Application on the top, our transport protocols in the bottom, and the TAP system in the middle. I guess we all agree on that. And I've just quoted a few words from our charter, which says that we are to describe an abstract interface that the applications can use in order to get to the right protocols. Next. So then the first draft we discussed today defines all the features of these transport protocols. So it describes what the transport protocols can do that we are going to use And maybe some prematurely, Michael Welzel and I tried to start very slowly to do the document 2 by, next slide, writing a draft yesing TAPS minimal set. And in that draft, we found a minimal set, or we tried to find a minimal set of features that could be used as a starting point to define document 2. But what we found was that that minimal set was maybe not very productive in going further in order to fulfill our charter to be able to implement the TAPS system up there. So in my mind, I'm not part of this other draft that we have discussed today, but I think the reason they started to do that, next slide, was to find how can we use the transport protocols. Because in order to implement the TAP systems, you need an interface to the transport protocol. And that's what draft Welzel does. It defines this interface to the transport protocols. So I think that's why these two documents, draft Welzel and draft IETF TAPS transports, complements each other so nicely. One say how you can use the transport protocols, and the other say what the transport protocol does. But then, how do we go on further in order to make document 2 and fulfill our charter? Next slide. I think we need to make document 2 mainly based on draft Welzel, because in document 2, in order to get further, I think we need to have this minimal set of interfaces between a TAP system and the transport protocols. Of course, we still need to know what's down here, but we need to primarily know how to access the transport protocol. And in my mind, that is what we should primarily define in document 2. So this is my main giveaway to you today. Say that document 2 has to define this interface to the transport protocols. It's a minimal interface that we can use in order to build a TAPS system. And that minimal interface is primarily based on the draft Welzel or the new versions of that draft, because it has to be an interface document primarily. And when I have this slide, this picture up, I couldn't resist to also, next slide, see where I see, or picture where I see the document 3, because we are going to describe an abstract interface, as it says in our charter. Document 3, of course, has to describe this abstract interface at the top between the application and the TAPS system. And I think document 3 then needs a document 2 that defines the interface between TAPS and the transport protocols. Thank you. Questions?
Okay. Well, thank you, Stein. So that's our agenda, but we kind of skipped one item that in here, on the slide here. Well, all right. So with regards to draft IETF TAPS transports, which we're going to try to take to working group last call before the next time we meet, hopefully before Christmas. This document needs a couple of detailed reviews, people who are going to look at it carefully, and people with that expertise are largely in this room. So can I get any volunteers of folks who are willing to sit down and go through this document carefully? Thank you, Karen. You kind of already did that. Yeah, this would be 08. This is once they produce once we get to working group last call, we want we want to know that there's a couple people who are committed to reading it carefully. Okay, we'll see if we can get another 1 or 2 people on the list. Any other business? Anything else folks want to raise today? Okay, I'd like to thank my 2 colleagues who I dragooned into taking notes, and our editors and Jabber scribes. Thanks, everybody. We're done. Whoa. That's what Etherpad's for. He pasted his notes into a Jabber window. What? No, into my. Oh, blue sheets, blue sheets. Did anybody not sign the blue sheets? They're up at the front here. I know we were pen impaired, so please sign it on the way up.
So where are
was curious as to whether